Hello listeners and welcome to Fighting Failure. This is the last episode of Season 3 Material World. And just in his advance warning, we'll be taking a break over the festive season before returning with an all-new season in January 2023. In this episode, we are going to be talking about Christmas and how its modern incarnation contributes massively to the consumerism problem that we've been discussing throughout this section. I'll be your host for this episode, Hisham Kanaan.
And I'm your co-host, Oscar Archibald. Okay, so I've written intro as a subheading, and I've forgotten to actually write the introduction. But by a short means of introduction, we could basically say that I think Christmas began its roots in the Christian tradition, naturally. Although there's an interesting element of the fact that Jesus was born in April, so why is Christmas December 25th?
Yeah.
And I think there's also an element. Yeah, I think there's also an element of a certain pagan festival that was sort of converted into Christmas. And I think the same thing is true with Easter, but not totally sure about that. But it's really interesting how, my family is certainly secular, and none of us believe in the whole Christian God, Jesus side of things. But we do absolutely celebrate Christmas every year, and we have a tree and Christmas parties and that sort of thing. So it's interesting how Christmas being transformed from a celebration of the birth of the prophet of a certain Abrahamic religion to becoming this sort of strange, sort of Christian, but sort of very secular societal tradition that exists across much of the Western world.
And I'd still say, there's definitely still some roots in religion that the whole, festive season has, that, Christmas has, and a lot of, the Christian community celebrate this as the birthday of God, of Jesus, sorry. But it's become a lot more, and it's become, in a lot of the Western world, it's become a holiday about family and about celebrating with each other and being close to one another and showing your love for one another. And there's a lot of good things about Christmas. So obviously, let's just start off by saying we're not at all dissuading Christmas. I love Christmas. Oscar likes Christmas. He's wearing a Christmas pug shirt right now. Christmas is great, and it's a wonderful holiday for numerous reasons. Yeah, and it brings a lot of light to the sort of dreary winter that you have throughout a lot of the northern hemisphere.
For most of my family who live in Australia, the school year goes from sort of February to December, and then they have the summer holidays at the same time as Christmas. And it's sort of like if you have a birthday in Christmas, it's that sort of same thing, that they have the two holidays in one, which is not so great because you have a really long year. I think it's really nice for those of us who live in the northern hemisphere and have this sort of September to July school year to have that element of you have the summer holidays, and then you also have that sort of middle, really difficult part of the year because there's so little light around this time of year. It's 3:30 p.m. here, and the sun's already setting. It brings a lot of light to that dreariest time of the year.
So Christmas is awesome, but of course, we're here to discuss the not so awesome aspects that currently have become adopted into certain aspects of Christmas culture.
Without further ado, Fighting Failure presents the insane consumerism of Christmas.
All right, so let's start off with some statistics right now. So, in the UK, household waste, primarily solid domestic waste, which is basically everything you throw in your dustbin that either gets incinerated or goes to a landfill, usually increases by about 30% during the festive season. A lot of this can be accounted for by packaging of products.
That includes food products as well as sort of manufactured items as well.
The gift wrappings that we, like to put on our presents for people. So, and that leads us on to the next stat, which is that about 3,000 tons of turkey packaging goes to waste each holiday season. And that's often that shrink wrap plastic that's commonly used for packaging in the meat of meat products and other food products. And that's what you see in all those big stores where you'll buy your Christmas turkeys.
Continuing on from this food element of the turkeys, another classic Christmas food is, of course, the mince pie. Is that very popular in America? It's definitely very popular here.
It's not very popular in the US. You do have sort of meat pies, but it's not as much of a thing. Definitely in Malawi, and in other parts of Africa where we've lived, it's sort of come with the British, and it is a thing that you can get in some stores, and it's something that people make, I think it's sort of British. But yes,
It's a really interesting story behind the name of mince pies, because obviously mince pies contain mince meat, but this mince meat is, unless it has like suet in, which is animal fat, it's made out of fruits. It's not made out of like ground beef or something like that. And it's interesting from a linguistic point of view, the origin of the term mince meat, and it comes from the time in Old English when every food was called meat. That was just like the word for food, and so mince meat was like fruit meat, and that was a type of meat. And then if you had like meat, that was called flesh meat.
Yeah, I had no idea about that. I thought that minced pies were like with the minced meat, because we get that in stores here, and like that it's something you see around is like the minced meat pies. But I just assumed that that's what it was. But then that's very British.
No, it's made of fruits. They're not the tastiest fruits. It's most people who like them. I'm not a massive fan of the sort of strange combination of spices and stuff that go into it. But no, the ones that we had I had some mince pies today, and they didn't have milk, eggs, or meat in them. But most mince pies will have butter in the pastry, because that's a selling point, made with real butter.
Yeah, so yeah, I've definitely not had a proper mince pie then. But I mean, I've definitely heard of people having mince pies at Christmas. That's something that you definitely do hear about here, but not something that we do.
The statistic is actually 75 million edible mince pies. So this is not like the strange ones that go off. It's just the way that mince pies are generally presented. It's not like you cook a mince pie at home and eat it with your Christmas meal. It's usually something that like 100 of them are bought and put on a table at an office party, and then sometimes they'll all be eaten. But just today I was at sort of a Christmas erg regatta for rowing, like everyone sort of dresses up and do a 5K team relay erg, and there were like 400 mince pies or something, and there were probably 50 left on the table, which is going to be thrown out, and that's like an event with maybe 20, 30, 40 people in it, and so you can imagine multiply that by the population of the country. So many just perfectly edible mince pies go to waste because of the sort of format in which they're presented.
So that's of course the big problem. Next point would be that about 60 million unwanted presents are gifted each year. And definitely something that I've noticed, as I've gotten older, especially post-COVID, is that there's not really much that I, want. Like my wish list, I don't really have one. But still people, it's like you have to get people stuff at Christmas, which is nice. But then, of course, you don't want to like over shop for someone who doesn't want to be shopped for.
The question is like, to what extent is it actually nice to get someone a present if they literally don't want it? That's the extent to which corporations have pressured us into thinking that gift giving is such an essential part of Christmas, is that then we're just buying like rubbish for people that don't even really want it. It's been really interesting for myself to see my own personal transformation from as a little kid just like wanting the whole world for Christmas and this and this and this for Christmas, and always wanting different things, or like Legos or whatever. And then like this year I'm like, I don't even know what to ask for. Literally, I have no idea what I want. I'm very lucky that I don't really want anything more. Like, of course you could say, oh, I would love to have the newest iPhone and live in a mansion and drive a Ferrari. But in terms of realistic things that, I mean, realistically, I don't actually want to live in a mansion, because then I can't live in a walkable, accessible area, and it'd be a nightmare to clean. And I also don't want to drive a Ferrari because it's noisy and horrible. And so it's the sort of, I've gotten to the point where I've like got all the sort of stuff that I'd have ever wanted or ever considered to have wanted. And so it's almost a bit of a burden every time September, where my birthday is, and December roll around, to try and think of stuff to get, just because, you can't, if someone's going to give you 50 quid worth of stuff, you've got to seize the opportunity. And that's the sort of societal mindset that we've gotten into that's unhealthy from a planetary perspective, as well as even potentially mental health, but from a monetary perspective as well, can be damaging.
Aside from that, of course, that accounts for a large amount of waste, because there's things that you get and you just never use, or you never see, or it just becomes waste that you just chuck out after 3 years. So of course, 60 million unwanted presents. About 49% of all Christmas shopping is performed online.
It just makes it seem a bit tokenistic. It's just, you're just browsing online, looking at these poppy-uppy adverts and just choosing something to be delivered to your door. There's not, when you're not sort of going out and searching and finding something personal, that sort of strips away any Christmas element that was ever present in that action of gift giving. And I'm not saying that's something that's inherently bad or something that we don't do either, but it calls into question the sort of validity of the Christmas gift giving, or how much thought or attention. Like if someone said, here's something that I want for Christmas, can you please give it to me? And here's the link to buy it online. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But there comes a point when you're just sort of like trying to find something to give just for the sake of giving a gift.
According to Business Waste UK, the amount of Christmas plastic packaging that was placed in the general waste bin instead of the recycling bin in 2018 was estimated at around 114,000 tons, which is a lot of waste. And that's, I mean, a lot of those plastics we have to keep in mind obviously couldn't have been placed in the recycling bin because they're non-recyclable. And of course, like we've mentioned in our other episodes, yeah.
Here's some crinkly plastic. This is not recyclable. See, like, we're environmentalists, and I've got a piece of crinkly plastic on my table. If anyone's interested, because I got one of those retractable badge holders for my keys.
Anyhow, I mean, that's a huge amount of waste. And I'm sure we can talk about greenwashing in a sec. Actually, we should definitely add that to the notes. So I'll leave that for later. So unless you have anything to add, Oscar, why don't we move on to the problems?
So, yeah, in case you didn't realize, that was statistics.
Yeah, that was statistics.
That's problems.
That's like
it's
our
double whammy this time.
Yep.
We haven't really done the statistics format since like the very first episodes.
Yeah.
But I think in this case,
10 or 12, yeah.
I think the issue that we had when we were... Whoops, I just kicked my wire. I think the issue we had when we were doing it in the early episodes is it was very much just here's some statistics and not much development. I think it's better to do it as we did it this time, which is here's some statistics and a discussion on the implication of those.
I think it was quite good. Let us know what you think if you enjoy that. That's
do. We have social medias, and they are linked.
Another reason that we cut the section is because I hate saying statistics. My brain like doesn't want to. It's one of those words.
Yeah, and there's also the elements that it's really difficult to visualize.
Yeah.
3,000 tons of turkey packaging. Like, what does that mean? It's just a number, and especially when you're going between like 3,000 tons and 30 million, and it doesn't actually. It's not very good at creating a visual image in someone's head.
But I think we did a pretty good job.
Problems.
Yeah. So, problem number 1. Gift giving pushed by companies to promote their businesses. Right off the bat, Christmas sales, advertisements, sale codes, this whole concept of products that go on sale. They all just promote over consumerism because you say, on Black Friday or whatever, everything's on sale. So you're like, well, I may as well buy 10 presents for this person and 10 presents for this person. And it's like this whole idea. And I've been getting messages in my spam from companies that are like, look at our Christmas bundles, Christmas this, Christmas that, and a Christmas special release here, special release there. And it's like everything's so specifically marketed.
It would make sense if it was like, here's a Christmas sale on Christmas trees or laurel wreaths or something that's actually related to Christmas. But it doesn't really make much sense if it's like, here, it's time for Duolingo's Christmas deal. And it's like, what on earth does Duolingo have to do with Christmas? They're just sort of taking advantage of the holiday season.
I mean, and not that Duolingo is a bad thing to purchase at Christmas. Anyway.
That would be a good climate-friendly Christmas present, actually, a subscription to Duolingo. Super Duolingo.
Anyway, it's this whole idea that these companies are over-promoting or I guess just promoting in general and really like pushing their products upon you around Christmas because they want you to buy their products because that's how they make money and that's how the world works, I guess.
Exactly. Companies don't put on sales because they're nice and they're sharing the Christmas spirit. They do it because it makes them more money. And like I felt victim, you could say, to a sale recently. I was going to Sainsbury's and I bought some jammy Dodgers, just like sort of jammy biscuit things, whatever. And they were on sale. They were 15p off, so it was instead of 80p, it was 65p. And so I bought 2 packets. I was like, I'll save one for another time when I would have gone to Sainsbury's, and then I'll just have them then instead of going to Sainsbury's. And I'll save myself a neat 30 pence. But I ate the second packet the very next day at a time when I wouldn't have had time to go to Sainsbury's. To be fair, I was hungry. I was like staying at school late for a concert. But it just gives you an idea of how we can fall prey to these sort of banners and signs and sales so easily.
And all these 2 for 1, 3 for 1. Like buy 3, you get $4 off or whatever. Like there's all these ways that they kind of make it seem like it's the ideal time to buy as much as you want. So then you end up bulk consuming these products. And it's not just like clothing and toys and stuff. It's also like food and everything at Christmas time. Everywhere in the world, even in places where Christmas is barely celebrated, you get these Christmas sales.
Yeah, especially now that so much stuff is sold online.
So, of course, that's not great because then you're getting more products than you maybe need. Then there's waste if something can expire. So if it's a food product and you get 2 for 1 or whatever, and you end up not eating one and it goes bad, you chuck that away. There's also the whole element of packaging. So then you have 2 times the packaging, and maybe you didn't need the product. So then it's just a waste of that non-reusable, non-recyclable plastic that is just going to become SDW, solid domestic waste. So, I mean, of course, there's that. And then it's just like some of the stuff we just don't need. And we're just like, well, we can take that. And then we just end up with, my desk is piled with stuff that I, like, most of it I don't need, like keychains and random things that I've collected over the years. My desk's not clean. It says a lot about me. My rug's not clean either. I keep my clothes clean, and I keep my Legos quite clean, but I don't keep my desk or floor very clean. But I mean, you end up getting heaps and heaps of stuff that you don't want. And it's also, like we talked about that statistic in there that about 60 million unwanted presents are gifted each year. And one of the reasons is because people see something and they say, well, I might as well get that, without having a second thought as to whether or not that's something that you should actually be getting the person that you're buying it for.
Something that's also promoted by companies through their sort of Christmas messaging and advertising is an inflated expectation of how expensive Christmas gifts should be. Not like how expensive, no, but like how expensive they should be. So what I imagine started as a sort of small familial gesture of gift giving. Maybe families come together and exchange presents. It's sort of bigged up by companies to the point it's like, oh, for Christmas you could buy your son or daughter a $1,000 MacBook. That seems like a reasonable gift. When like originally, well, we would have started as something that cost like £5 or something. So there's the companies are driving this expectation for untenably expensive Christmas presents, such as electronics specifically. And people are buying into that,
Yeah, I mean, and where are we getting this? Where are we seeing these deals? Advertisements everywhere. We talked about this in the whole of this consumerism section, but I mean, advertisements I've gotten like 5 emails today, in my spam from different companies, different fast food chains, or like Christmas sales, Christmas whatever, get this, get that, get this $3,500 guitar that I actually really want, but that's a pipe dream. I don't need that. And like, there's all these, like, you drive on the street, even in Malawi, you drive on the street and you see signs up, for different products. And I mean, it's not as common as it is in the US for sure, but I mean, everywhere. And then these are everywhere, these advertisements. And they'll get you. I mean, even in the store, you walk in and on the label it says 2 for 1, and then it's like, oh, I may as well get 2 of those. And it's being pushed on you everywhere, implicitly, explicitly, whether you know it or not. You're consuming advertisements, like we discussed in our, what was it, last episode, I believe?
Yeah, episode 39. And the next sort of related issue, and we've talked about this a bit in the statistics section, that people, especially like, I've gotten to a certain point where I don't really want to receive gifts. And my mum is definitely the sort of person that's like never really likes gifts, and it's like telling people, don't get me anything. I really just don't want anything. Because for many people, receiving a gift is totally a burden, because there's this absolute societal expectation that if you receive a gift, you must keep it. And if that person then comes over to your house, they should expect to say, oh, there's that thing I gave you. And if it's conspicuously missing, then that's a sort of societal faux pas. And so, especially the thing of re-gifting is so contraband.
And also, you don't want to have things that go missing, because then that you can assume that those things are either going in the dustbin, or being put in your attic to later go in the dustbin. So like, also, when you're getting those gifts, and whether or not you're keeping them on your cluttered desk, on display in your living room, or just chucking them out, I mean, eventually it's just waste because you can't use it. It doesn't serve a purpose to you. You didn't want it, and now you just have this thing that you can't use, and that, I mean, who's gonna, sometimes it's just like, who would even take this? Like, you can't even donate this. So it's just one of those things. If the person says that they don't want anything, it's probably best not to get them anything.
People will appreciate you not getting anything. Don't think that it's going to be some sort of magical surprise if you do get things and they've secretly wanted something. If they want something, they'll tell you. And if they don't want something, then don't get them something. Because they just fulfill their wishes, Don't just try and be some sort of hero in a knight in shining armor,
Next point, tinsel and other decorative items. This is definitely something that, so most of these problems, definitely me and Oscar can say we probably contribute to some degree, and take part in, and but tinsel and decorative items, I generally don't like, and I don't think that it's nice. I don't think that it adds value. I don't take part, and I highly discourage. But it's become such a big part of Christmas culture. Tinsel on the roof, tinsel on your tree, tinsel everywhere. Like little Christmas stickers, little jelly things to put on your windows. Like there's Christmas things, all these weird little decorative items that, I don't know, like, do you really need them? And I'm not talking about like the lights, which of course there is a problem with lights, but it adds so much value socially that I think I don't mind the lights that go up, and certain, like, of course, the ornaments that go on your tree. Yeah, especially in winter. But like tinsel and just like these little plastic things that you just chuck on your walls and throw all over your tree, it's bad. And also, think about if you're putting tinsel on if it's an organic Christmas tree and you're putting tinsel on it, and then you're gonna chuck it out at the end of the season, it's almost impossible to get the tinsel off. Like tinsel, it drives me crazy, because you can't really pick it off, and it either rips or gets smaller, or something gets tangled. You don't see it, and then you end up just chucking it in your organic waste, and then you have like little bits of plastic that go in there. And I have seen bits of tinsel.
Yeah, and little bits of plastic shedding all across the floor, especially when it's like really lit up and attractive. Is a problem if you have pets like dogs or cats, especially cats, because they can like get anywhere. If it's a dog, you can sort of like put it on a table and maybe they get it to the side of your dog. But if they eat a bauble, that's probably not going to be very good for them. And having flashing lights will sort of aggravate them potentially.
Think about it. If you have young kids or if you have pets, not that young kids and pets are the same thing, but if you do have young kids or pets, it's tinsel is just a hazard, and so are these like other sticky little ornaments, and like there's just some things that you just better without, honestly. So there's that. Oscar, would you like to hit the next point?
Yeah, and we talked about lights before, and there's not a massive issue with lights, but like, do remember to turn them off at night. If you, often we can fall into a trap of just leaving the Christmas lights on forever. And maybe if you just have one Christmas tree with one thing of lights, it's gonna have pretty low power consumption. They're all LEDs, but you could imagine that if you're like one of those crazy American houses that have like lights on every square inch of the property, and like 15 Christmas trees out the front and a Santa on the roof, that's going to be consuming a lot of electricity, and that's probably a wasteful amount of electricity used.
I think we're pretty good about turning off the lights when we go to bed. There's definitely some nights where I wake up and I come out in the morning and they're on, but we don't put them out around the house. In Malawi, in the U.S., we might have, because it's dark from like 4:00 or earlier in the afternoon, and it's just depressing. So you kind of, that light, it just definitely adds some value to your day. So maybe we do that, but it's, for us, the lights are either on the Christmas tree, maybe we align them around one of the doorways or something, but we always turn them off, like, and they're LEDs as well. Like, that's the nice thing about the lights is, the reason I was saying as well, like, they're not the biggest of my worries, is that yes, when everyone's putting up lights, it does consume a lot of electricity, but they're LEDs. We've done a whole episode on LEDs, by the way. Oscar did that with a special guest, so go back and listen to that if you haven't. but they are a lot more environmentally friendly. And so when you use them, you have a lot less energy consumption. I mean, it's not that big a deal really, and it just adds so much value to the festive season. So I wouldn't really worry about that.
I would be interested actually to see a statistic on like the net impact of lights, because a small impact individually, I'd be interested to see how it adds up. But yeah, especially if it's generated renewably, electricity is a smaller issue, and it's always something that sort of can be fixed in post, if you will, by changing electricity supplies. Whereas tinsel is something like once it's bought, it has that environmental impact from the beginning. So moving on from let us know. Moving on from tinsel is Christmas trees. I suppose the things on which tinsel is hung. And you could say, cutting down so many trees is not a good idea, but I would imagine that most people get their Christmas trees not by going to the middle of the Canadian rainforest and cutting down a pine, but rainforest? No, not rainforest, like alpine forest. But I think most people get them sort of from commercial pine tree farms, and though they will replant their trees every year for commercial reasons, obviously. But if you get a plastic tree, there's an obvious issue there with the production and waste problems of plastic. Even if you use it for 100 years, at some point that plastic will degrade. Personally, we do have a plastic tree. Yes, that is true. It will degrade its environment. We have a plastic tree, though. Having lived in Malawi and Sri Lanka, you can't really get pine trees there. It does, and it's not good. It sheds a lot of plastic. Just yesterday when we were putting it up, we had to get the vacuum cleaner out to mop up the floor. But we have had it for 10 years. And it's still going strong, which is surprising because I would expect it to be a bit crappy if it's made of plastic. What we used to do when we'd spend Christmases sort of overseas rather than at our house, we'd be in some sort of random apartment in like San Sebastian in Spain is one place we went once, and I can't remember if we get like tinsel or some sort of really basic decoration, and just put it on like a random houseplant and call that the Christmas tree. I think that's quite cute. There's a natural beauty in plants that aren't perfectly manicured pine trees.
I mean, yeah, and of course, like, yeah, I mean, those spruce trees that you put up, like those evergreen trees there, I mean, they grow fast. They're grown for that purpose. It's not like definitely not saying you should stop cutting down a spruce tree for Christmas. Like, I mean, they're grown for that purpose. They have a consistent crop of them. Like, that's not really a big worry. The worry would be like if you're going out into like a real forest, like an old growth. Well, I mean, probably not. Those trees are too big. But if you're going into like a natural forest, and you're just like hacking down a tree, then that's not good. But I don't think anyone's really doing that, and that's not on large scale. So, I mean, generally, trees probably not the biggest of our problems, but still, we do generate quite a bit of waste from it.
Talking about waste, Christmas food. We mentioned mince pies before, but I think there's an issue with the whole of Christmas food. So the first element is obviously just wasteful. People eat far more than what they need to do on Christmas Day. I think average person probably in the West, the statistic before, consumes like 6,000 calories, which is 3 times the recommended daily intake, which is like not very good. Most people will probably attend multiple Christmas parties, not just a family one, or maybe you'll have like a dad's side of the family, a mum's side of the family, an office Christmas party, or a school Christmas party, or 3 different Christmas parties hosted by 3 of your different friends. And so in each of those events, overconsumption really does add up. Overconsumption as well as just waste of stuff that's not eaten. If you have like a large banquet for Christmas, a lot of stuff will inevitably be thrown out from over catering, or not everyone eats all of the ice cream or the main or anything like that. There'll often be leftovers, and that results in a lot of food waste as well.
Yeah, I mean, so of course food waste is not good, because already like the food production process is so environmentally degrading in general, that to be over purchasing and over consuming and then wasting tons. I mean, also guys, think about this. If you're eating past the point at which you're full, you're still wasting food essentially. So I mean, the amount of waste that also goes unaccounted for on Christmas. Yeah, I mean, so it's just huge, like industrial scale farming, obviously not good. The turkey is probably, I mean, it could have easily been grown on corn feed or something, which was probably grown with GMO corn and pesticides and synthetic fertilizers, which all, there's a lot of problems that pertain to those methods. We've talked about them in previous episodes. Season 1, episode 5, I think we did that. 6 maybe as well.
That was episode 5 was vegetarian and veganism.
So, but we did mention it. But then there was, anyway.
Pesticides and fertilizers, I think, was 6 and 7. Then 8 was Kiss the Ground. 9 was, what was 9? 9 was tilling, I think. And 10 was meat industry.
Oh, good memory. But yeah, so I mean, that's the sort of gist of food waste, which is, obviously. And like as well, I mean, if you think about Turkey, right? And the amount of like meat waste, and you can't put that in compost. A lot of people don't compost in the Western world, especially at Christmas, around that time of year. And so,
although to be clear, if you're in the UK, you can put meat scraps in the food waste bin, because that's not, or check your council, though, that's generally not composted. I think it's anaerobically digested, so it sort of works for any sort of organic food. Not organic, but like organic made of carbon.
Yes, I essentially, you could even here, like where we have our own food waste bin, you could sort of put in the meat waste, but that's kind of, it's disgusting to deal with, and it's like, it's really hard. It's something that I think a lot of people don't do, and a lot of like service providers, especially like in the US, they won't accept meat in your food waste bin. So just keep that in mind as well.
Check locally, as always.
Like there's also a huge problem in the Western world, especially in like the US, but also in parts of Europe and the UK. I mean, obesity in a lot of the rich communities, and actually in a lot of the poor communities, is just off the charts. And so having this mass consumption around the festive season, especially because things are on sale, or maybe not on sale, but maybe you're just over purchasing food and then just overeating because it's there, that is a big contributor to obesity. And yeah,
a few quick statistics. So on average, the average person gains 1 kilogram of, I assume, fat every year. And of this, according to some studies, and obviously that sort of varies, there's a margin of error, 0.9 kilograms of this is gained at Christmas, like between mid-November and mid-January. And more worryingly, this small amount of weight, realistically, that people gain at Christmas is very rarely lost during the rest of the year. It's not sort of equilibrium, you can feast at Christmas, you'll be able to lose it later. That generally doesn't happen. And so, it might say 1 kilogram, like, what does that matter? But over a 10-year period of gaining a kilogram every year, that can change you from being a healthy weight to being overweight, and so on, moving into obesity as you grow older. Another statistic says that approximately half of the weight we gain during our adult lifetime is gained from that period between November and January. And another study showed that even those actively trying to like maintain a healthy weight or to lose weight, like doing things like calorie counting or exercising, or weight tracking, all those sort of things, even they gain an average of 0.3 kilograms over the holidays. There's also an element that overeating so much delicious food can have an effect, stressing out our hypothalamus, sort of the reward center in the brain, creating a sort of vicious cycle, which is why people that are already overweight will gain even more weight than those who weren't to start off with.
Would you like to start us off on our next point?
International travel obviously creates a massive amount of emissions, and like I think Thanksgiving is a time of a massive amount of travel in the US. Lunar New Year in China is a time of a massive amount of travel. That was sort of in the news at the sort of start of the COVID outbreak in 2019, 2020. And so at Christmas time for a lot of Europe and the Western world, and Australia equally, is a time when a lot of people will fly to see their family. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, to see your family. But some people will also just fly for the sake of going on a holiday because it's Christmas or whatever. And so there is a massive increase in the amount of people flying and just traveling in general at Christmas time. And that obviously creates a massive amount of carbon emissions. I
mean, it's really hard to avoid traveling, especially as someone who lives overseas. And it's not just if you live overseas. I mean, a lot of people also travel just for the sake of it around Christmas time because they have a break, which is fine. I mean, it's good to get out and see the world, and it's good to go and see family if that's what you're doing for the festive season, like what we're doing tomorrow, traveling to Vermont. So, I mean, of course, traveling for the festive season, it's very hard to avoid, but it does create a lot of emissions. So, I mean, if you're going to be traveling overseas. Like if, say, for example, I was going to go to Paris, maybe look into the possibility of using a train to get to, I don't know, is there a direct one to London? I'm not sure how the train system works through Europe, but there is definitely are extensive train systems that you can use to get around through Europe, and or you could do a biking trip there, or you could just stay there, or if you're in your own country, like
I don't know if you
I
want
was,
to bike in January in
yeah.
Europe.
Oh yeah, obviously not. But I mean,
But if you're like in Europe, then you really shouldn't need to fly unless you're like me and your family's in Australia. In which case, like my family is flying over from Australia to Europe.
Ideally, the flight would just be to one destination and from another destination back to your home. So I mean, between places, try and keep the travel as friendly as possible. A lot of Europe is accessible by train. I mean, obviously, I don't know. I was talking about bikes because it's winter, but by walking in certain areas, taxi cab, like depending on how far you're going, but there are a lot of options to take into consideration. And especially if you're staying like within a city, you don't need a car. Only if if you want to rent a car, maybe to travel from one place to another. But I mean, you definitely don't need a car if you're traveling in Europe. In the US as well, it's hard not to travel by plane or by car. But still, if you can, I mean, try and keep things local. And if you're not traveling at all,
if all your family like live nearby, then you shouldn't need to fly. But you know, it is important to see your family. And so if you're like me and your family lives on the other side of the world, it's still important to see them fairly regularly. And we definitely pay for carbon offsets for the flights that we take. But as we've surely talked about before, carbon offsets are not perfect. And something that I've seen, there's this series on YouTube called like Jet Lag the Game, which is great. Sort of these people basically playing like games across the world, and a lot of that involves flying. And so they don't just like carbon offset, they carbon offset it 10 times over, and using sort of like the gold standard of carbon offsets. And I think that's better, but I think even they have acknowledged that it's not perfect. And there's really dodgy stuff about carbon offset. So we carbon offset our flights, and we fly because we live on the other side of the world to the rest of our family. But for most people, especially considering like the massive size of the developing world, for most people, the family live nearby, and so there shouldn't really be a need to fly. And I know that's not really very fair, that just because we happen to live abroad, that suddenly get sort of a green pass to fly around. And you know, in terms of the distribution of which people take like 90% of the flights, it's like the top 1% of earners, and it's really unequal or unequal in that sense.
Yeah, and also like if you're gonna be staying in your country or within your general area, it's also like it's 100% feasible to travel. I mean, like we were in Malawi for the past 2 Christmases now. We didn't travel outside of Malawi, both because of COVID. So basically just COVID. But we definitely got to explore the country a lot more, and we drove down to the lake. We drove up to Nika Plateau. Like there's trips, you know, within your country and within your area that you can make if you do want to just get out of your house, that you can easily access without going abroad or without boarding a flight and wasting a lot of money and causing a lot of GHG emissions. So like there are options locally as well that you should be looking for.
Can I please rant about Secret Santa? It is the most pointless gesture that like nobody actually appreciates having a £5 gift from a schoolmate. Like if you wanted to have £5 worth of chocolates, you could buy yourself £5 worth of chocolates. And all that the sort of £5 gift giving in a sort of circular fashion does is mean that you have a slightly less optimal choice of how you spend this £5 on chocolate, realistically, because it's always really chocolate. There's very little you can do in the way of a nice personal gift for under £5, which is often the limit for school Christmas Secret Santas. In my house room at school, we've chosen people tried to set up a Secret Santa, and then so many people, when after sort of group pressure, we were finally given the option to opt out of the Secret Santa. Enough people opted out, they were just like, forget this, whatever. Just bring in your own stuff on the last day of school, and we can just have sort of a fun time together. And that's a lot more optimal. And I think there's something just so tokenistic about Secret Santa. And it's really characteristic of the sort of new consumeristic Christmas, that there's just sort of this tradition that most workspaces and Even families will sometimes do if it's a big enough family, because it obviously means that instead of buying a present for everyone, you buy a present for one person, but everyone gets a present. It's a makes sense in principle, but at the end of the day, it means that none of the presents are particularly good, and it really is devoid of all of the original Christmas meaning that I'm sure was created with good intentions, but it sort of loses that element of it very quickly. And it's sort of thing. It's just like, oh, we've got to go buy a box of celebrations for Wolfie's Christmas school secret Santa. Ugh. So and then what, you probably get pretty much the exact same thing back, and it's like, so it's not so much that the idea of gift giving is an issue, and that's actually a really nice element of Christmas. Did you just delete the bullet point? Can you undelete it, please? I was just about to say it. Okay. It's not so much that element of gift giving, but it's the whole over consumeristic idea of how it's implemented, and the lack of personalization. Because I think, being kind and giving gifts is just as beneficial. Studies show it's just as beneficial for the person receiving the gift, who feels like, oh, this is so nice. And we all, as like sort of strangely social creatures, we also receive a kickback from giving a gift. We're like, and it makes us feel happy to be kind. And that's how sort of society manages to cobble itself together. But when it comes to these sort of Christmas things, we don't get much of a sort of personal pleasure in just buying some random crap from the supermarket to give for the Secret Santa. And so you lose that benefit for both the giver of the gift and the recipient of the gift. And so it loses that sort of human element to it.
All right. Next point. Christmas movies. And it's not so much that I'm going to let Oscar rant about this in a second. But in my opinion, they're great. I mean, in terms of bringing the community together, sitting down with your family and enjoying some time. I mean, you have to spend a lot of time indoors, of course, around Christmas. So it's good to have something to help you celebrate the festive season without having to be outdoors in the freezing cold, especially if you're living in the Northern Hemisphere. But there are definitely a lot of incorrect social ideas that can sort of come out through these movies. Like any movie, really. But bigger than that, there's also a lot of like implicit advertisements, and also these like ways that they sort of push the consumeristic side of things with the whole Santa and everyone gets 10 presents and everyone gets whatever, and everyone runs downstairs on Christmas Day to get like a ton of presents, and the whole idea is just kind of boosted by that. And it's, I mean, I love some Christmas movies. My sister loves Christmas movies. I can't watch more than, I love Christmas movies. I can't watch more than like 5 in a year. But I mean, and they're fun and they're great. But I mean, they do have these little problems that just beware. Like, we don't want people sort of picking up on this, like, especially like if you're gonna, I don't know, it's hard to not expose kids to that consumeristic side of things because it's so ingrained in the culture at this point in time. But I mean, just definitely try and separate the consumerism from the whole family benefit that's provided from Christmas, right? I mean, like, they're two different things. Definitely gift giving does have good benefits for both parties, but not like over buying and giving things that no one's ever going to use, and tons of candy and like too much food. There's certain things that we could probably.
And so I mean, this point was sort of spurred because Christmas movies. We watched Love Actually last night. Have you seen it, Hisham?
I have seen half of it. I think I got tired and didn't finish it, and then I was like, well.
Yeah, and I think it's a very classic Christmas movie, a very popular one. It's 19 years old now. It was released in 2003. But so I sort of watched it with with my siblings, and then after I went to bed, I look it up because when I was watching, I felt that it felt very misogynistic to me. A lot of the elements of how the relationships in the movie worked, and then there was also the element of the fat shaming as well. And so I just wanted to look it up and see what sort of criticism that we posted online, and ended up spending a couple of hours. I don't know if it was actually a couple of hours, but I spent a fair while sort of reading these different articles that were commenting on Love Actually, and I think it's interesting to see how Hollywood sort of exacerbates the social construct around Christmas. There's the over-consumeristic. I don't think this was particularly an element of Love Actually. The over-consumeristic idea you see in a lot of Christmas movies, that they have like these tons of perfectly decorated presents and these perfect families, unless they're not perfect, but that's part of the plot, and then it becomes perfect in the end or whatever. Unrealistic expectations. They'll have the perfect Christmas trees, and they sort of display the apex of how all of this works and create sort of unrealistic expectation for most people of what Christmas should look like. Any of these towns that they're set in have like some sort of eerily perfect Christmas, and I sort of cringe a lot when I watch stuff, even like stuff like Home Alone, about how obsessed these American families are with their Christmas. But like, I have no idea if it's an accurate representation of how the culture works there. I've never been to America, definitely not at Christmas time. But I think from Love Actually, it was sort of disheartening how strangely romance was presented, as much as like the women having no power in the relationships, and it all sort of working out fine in the end, and people sort of laughing it off, and however, in a way that was very unrealistic. And I think that's an issue, that it creates incorrect ideas. It gives people false hope that, oh, because it's Christmas, I can be super romantic and I'll find the love of my life and we'll get married and whatever. And it's not really how real love works in real life. And so if people don't watch these movies with a careful eye to the details, they could sort of be fooled by it. And I think Hollywood is very much responsible in more than just Christmas for spreading false ideas about society.
This goes like far, far, far beyond Christmas movies. This is like every movie. This is Hollywood. This is Bollywood. It's just modern, like the modern media. Like, that's just the way it is, right? Everything. No one wants to see something that's not perfect, right? That's why you watch things, so you can fantasize about perfection. But it does promote a lot of like socially maybe negative images and stereotypes. And so, of course, there are problems that you just generally have to be careful about. But it's, of course, Christmas. We love Christmas movies. Sometimes they're cringy, yes, but they are good. And so let's move on to the solutions. What do you think? What's that? What's that sound? What are you doing?
Blinds down. It's too dark. There we go. Let's go ahead, shall we?
Yeah. You lead us on.
Okay. So something that's quite heartwarming, I think, in terms of solutions, is that gifts like giving money to charity on someone else's behalf are becoming much more popular. And I think this is really nice because we've gotten to the point where a lot of privileged people will have the sort of stuff they want, but you still want to carry that sense of the Christmas gift giving. And a really nice way that people have come up with to do that is to sort of donate to a charity. And often this will be a charity that sort of matters to someone. So say they are a cancer survivor, then you could donate to a cancer research charity or anything like that. Or they love dogs, donate to a dog shelter. And so I think it can be both personalized, and it's really nice because people get a sort of emotional kickback from donating to charity. It's good for both the giver and the receiver to have sort of a donation done in someone else's name. And it also results in positive change in the world rather than negative change as a result of buying rubbish products. Instead, you're paying for positive change to happen in the world. So that's a really nice way to sort of continue gift giving, but make it positive instead of negative.
Another thing is this, like, for me, if I'm gonna get a present, I want it to be something practical, right? Like, I think oftentimes when someone's like looking for a present, and because there's this like obligation that we've sort of talked about, or I guess like there's a stigma against not buying a present, so you have to sort of buy one. And I think when people do this, often they just look for something, and often it's something that you'll never use. It's something that's useless, that you'll never use, that your family will never use. But there's a lot of options and like opportunities to buy things that you'll put to use. Like, I'd be happy to get a pair of like snow pants. Like there's, I'm not like I want snow pants because we live in Malawi, but like, you get what I'm saying. Like, there's certain types of clothes. There's things that you can use in your everyday life, that, if you're going to get a gift, or if you're going to ask for a gift, or if you're going to gift someone a gift, I think often getting something that they'll actually be able to use, not something that's just like I may as well have this, or like I really really want this, unless it's like a little kid and you want to give them something special that they'll play with. But
I think kids will be very disappointed if you get them like a pencil case for Christmas. But for adults, it can often be really nice to have something tailored, personal.
As someone like who's, you know, as a teen, like as a slightly older teen, and definitely like coming into, I think like people coming into adulthood and like adults, like there's some people who definitely want like random things, but I think a lot of people would be perfectly fine with something that, I mean, like there's some nice things, and like maybe there's a very nice pair of pants, or like a nice floral shirt, or like something that you like want but that you'll be able to wear or use every day. Like there's things that you can get that you can actually put to use, instead of just like play with maybe one day and then just put down for the rest of the year and never touch again, right?
Subscriptions can also come in nicely.
I love getting a subscription. Yeah, I have like
a subscription to, we mentioned Super Duolingo, or yeah, like a magazine, or especially digital subscriptions to magazines. If you live in Malawi, you unlikely to receive the print edition.
You can't get it sent here.
But there's tons of subscription-y stuff there. KiwiCo, I know, is good for kids. Wolf gets that. He really enjoys it. So the bottom line is, tell people what you want. If you know that your grandparents are getting you presents, then tell them what you want. And ideally, they'll be receptive to them. They'll be more than happy to give you what you want. If it's reasonable, like don't ask for.
If someone's definitely going to get you something and you don't necessarily, I mean, if you're not like asking for something, but someone is going to get you a present, right? You can say like like you'd be okay receiving this, or you'd be okay receiving this, or something like this would be useful. Like I can say I want, like I'd be fine with any summer clothes, or I'd be fine with any whatever, and then people can like look for something that you could enjoy, even if it wasn't something that you like really wanted, because then you're not just wasting when someone buys you something, if they are gonna like 100% buy you something, even if you don't want it.
Yeah. The next solution is plant-based Christmas dinner. Christmas, I mean, obviously it's best to be plant-based every time of the year, but replacing murdered turkey body with like a seitan roast. You don't have like a dodgy nut roast, but you can get lots of good fake meat products. Or you can make like a seitan. It's made out of wheat gluten. You can home make that. Or you could do something like different than the classic tradition for Christmas. There's lots of recipes online, lots of ideas online, and you can do a bit of research around that.
And also like another point, or another sort of like innovative point, I guess, is sustainable packaging, right? Like there are options that, I mean, often packaging, like the wrapper paper that you get is composite material, which means that it's basically a combination of paper and plastic, and it looks like paper and it feels like paper, but it can't be recycled. It wasn't recycled paper, and it's just going to go to waste. Like there are paper, like there's purely paper packaging that you can get. You can put it in bags that can be reused. Like there's ways to wrap your presents so that you're using less wrapping paper, which is also really good. Because if you already have some and you just want to limit how much you're using, I mean, also you limit how much you have to buy, because it's not very useful. You use it like once a year. Then like there are ways to limit how much you use like wrapping techniques. I mean, you can look it up online. I was just watching some actually, but there's definitely like options to avoid like unnecessary extra packaging, right?
Avoid traveling to remote fancy locations for Christmas. Like something that can be really nice to do if you're like in the northern hemisphere is to like rent a holiday cottage somewhere where it'll snow. So that could be like going up to Scotland. You could take the train up to Scotland, and then have a nice holiday cottage somewhere secluded, if that's what you're up for, and that could be really nice. That was especially good in the days of COVID when we sort of needed to be out of the way, but you didn't want to like stay at home for Christmas. But avoid flying certainly for Christmas. But taking the train is always great. Similarly, avoid unnecessary decoration. We've said, lights and ornaments, okay? And you could definitely do it yourself, sort of make some ornaments out of like spare fabrics or anything like that, and that could be a really nice sort of personal touch as well as a sort of Christmas time activity. But avoid things like synthetic wreaths, tinsels, plastic trees, broken baubles, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, and like also if you live in a place like Malawi, I mean, instead of going to the shops and buying like those little shiny, weird little balls that are made of like plastic to put on your tree, there's like options. Like I've seen guys selling ornaments that they've made from different types of seed pods, and like, or you can make your own ornaments from natural materials. Yeah, Yeah, and it is. And even in Vermont, like there's natural, like there's guys who make wood products there as well, like, and you can buy them. We have some ornaments that come from Vermont. We have some ornaments that come from here. A lot of them are wood. We have ones from Morocco that are made of like lamb something. I don't know. It's not vegan, Oscar, by the way, but it was like the lamb was already dead, so it's just leather anyway. But like there are options to be more sustainable in your sort of like Christmas decorations, because Christmas decorations are also awesome. Again, we're not trying to discourage Christmas. We love Christmas too, but there's just ways to be a little bit better, I guess.
Closing thoughts. I think there's no inherent problem with the notion of Christmas or Hanukkah or any other Northern Hemisphere winter festivity. It provides a fantastic vehicle for regular family reunion and celebration. However, its current incarnation is taken advantage of by corporate interests and Hollywood filmmakers who like to feed false ideas into our brains and ultimately make us all that bit more miserable. So by taking some of the actions outlined in this episode, we can make Christmas back into a familial celebration of kindness and happiness, rather than an unsustainable corporate dystopia.
All right, I think that's all for this show. So this episode was written by Oscar Archibald and Hisham Kanaan, hosted by Hisham Kanaan, music by Hisham Kanaan, produced by Oscar Archibald. Thank you for listening to Fighting Failure. See you next time.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.